the budget examination. That process ends on Monday. But today, the Office of the Prime Minister was examined in this process, and we've only just completed that exercise. However, what you have been invited here is for a briefing, so I can give you a little, and the national community, a heads up on what we are facing and doing with respect to the extreme inclement weather that we have been facing in the last 36 to 48 hours. We have had unusually heavy rainfall, but we are in the middle of the rainy season. So from the beginning, we have to look at this as rainy season development. But every so often, every 10 or 15 years, we tend to get unusually heavy rains here and there. And also, today, we are expecting just about this time, I'm advised, high spring tides. As you know, spring tides are the highest tides. And most of our main water courses in Trinidad, East, Central, and South Trinidad, most of our water courses are either up to capacity or are overflowing. And of course, when you take into account that the outfall of these rivers are all into the Gulf of Paria, the high tides, and except for the South Coast rivers, of course, that go into the Columbus Channel, the high tides would prevent an outflow very quickly and would contribute to the accumulation of water in and around the river channels in the low-lying areas. So as I speak to you now, what has been happening is that we have been observing the flooding since mid-yesterday, thereabouts, and it has continued. In some areas, there is some falling taking place now, but we've had significant flooding in the east, in the Sangre Grande fishing pond area, in the La Hoqueta area, in the Manuel Congo. We've had in St. Augustine, Tunapuna, particularly in the Freeman Road area where the drainage channel there has affected many people. In the St. Helena and Kelly area, on the south bank of the Carina River, we've had significant flooding. The Carina River has broken its bank in 6 places and has facilitated flooding in the Las Lomas and Warren area. The Barakpur area has flooded, and Pluck Road, Ramai Trace, which are the same areas which suffered the flooding during Brett. I'm told that the flooding there is a little higher than it was during the Brett period, but it's just beginning to drain off. But the high tide this afternoon might see that draining off being impaired. And we have flooding in the Rochard Douglas Woodlands area. What has happened is that the 3 ministers who have been out in the field from the very beginning, the Minister of Local Government, who is the minister with the responsibility for first responders in the regional corporations, the Minister of Works has been out in the field continuously, and of course the Minister of National Security. As you know, the agency that stands in readiness to respond in this situation is the ODPM, the Office of Disaster and Preparedness and Management. That department is receiving reports from the 14 corporations, those that are affected. We haven't had any reports from the western area and the Port of Spain area, but starting in Barataria and El Socorro South, we've had flooding from that area going all the way to the east through central to the south. And the ODPM has been coordinating its responses and its call for assistance to the Defense Force. The Defense Force has been mobilized earlier today, and the heavy and high vehicles are out into the heavily flooded areas and are going through the high water, taking assistance and bringing some relief to people who are marooned in those areas. As I speak to you now, They are in the woodlands area, and Defence Force vehicles are on their way to these specific areas where the water is particularly deep, taking some relief to them and offering assistance to people who might be marooned in their location. We haven't had very many landslides yet, but if the rains continue, the soaked hillsides could see more landslides. We've had a few landslides on the north coast, but the Ministry of Works has already attended to those landslides, and as I speak to you now, there is no road that is impassable as a result of a landslide. All the landslides that have come down in mainly the northern part of the northern range have been attended to allow passage of equipment and normal traffic. We will continue to monitor the situation by bringing relief to those persons who want that relief and who are to benefit from the Defence Force personnel out there and the Ministry of Works personnel. Local government will continue to have corporations put their requests through ODPM for what kinds of assistance. Those persons who need immediate help, like mattresses and canned food stuff and so, we're getting those items to them. And tomorrow morning, there will be a press conference at the Ministry of National Security, where the ODPM and the ministry will report as to what has happened overnight. We're seeing some improvement in the weather, at least here in the north. So hopefully if that continues, we expect that the worsening of the situation as anticipated this morning, when it looked quite terrible, it appeared as though we were going to have another day of heavy rains, but that is apparently is not happening, and we are hoping that we just wait for the runoff and then start the cleaning up and bring assistance to those persons who are in fact affected in the areas I've mentioned. Some areas are more heavily affected than others, as you are to expect, and where there is greatest need, we'll focus our attention there and try to see how much relief we could bring as quickly as possible to the persons who are affected. These floods are largely riparian riverine floods, where the main watercourses are overwhelmed by the very heavy rains. Once the main watercourses are overwhelmed, then the tributaries can't outfall very easily into those watercourses, and then they themselves now become the cause of flooding for the areas that are drained. And of course, if the main water rivers can't expel their water into the Gulf because of the high tide situation, the water spreads out into the low-lying areas around. So it is basically the same situation that we experienced many times before. Some persons have been affected by human activity, some development works here and there, which would have caused some interference with the free flow of water in some channels. So some persons might have had flooding experiences a little heavier than they have seen before, or in one or two areas they would have had flooding where they haven't had it before. And this is sometimes the result of unintended consequences from developments, or in some instances persons who have occupied areas which are really the water courses, when the water courses are required to receive this kind of unusually heavy rainfall. But from all reports that I've had, I've been in continuous touch with the ministers in the field all day. From last night, early this morning, I've been in touch with them. And from all reports, it appears as though things are under control. There's a bit of a slow response here and there to some of the things that have to be done, but we're picking that up. And I expect that by tomorrow, if no additional rains, but by tomorrow we would be in a position to say to you that the worst would have passed and we would have responded completely to the needs of those who have been affected. So if you have any questions concerning this, I would take them now. If you can, it's a little noisy here in this room, I must apologize for that, but if you can, there's a microphone there. If you can use the mic, thanks. Is that mic on?
I think so.
Oh, now it's on, yeah.
Okay. I just came from a press conference with the ODPM, and the ODPM has taken some responsibility for their earlier response. They said it was due to a lack of communication.
A lack of what?
A lack of communication among the first responders themselves. Well, like I said, the ODPM has taken some responsibility. However, the ODPM Deputy Chief Executive Officer also said that, this issue is a small one and not as big as, could have happened or as has happened elsewhere. What measures are being put in place to guard against something major happening and we're not able to respond as quickly, especially from amongst first responders?
I must say that the existence, the presence and existence of the Office of Disaster and Preparedness is really to put the country in a position to respond to situations like these. And we are in the rainy season to expect that this might happen. And we are also in an earthquake zone, and any day we can be called upon to respond to a damaging earthquake. We are also at the southern end of the hurricane belt, and we have had experiences of hurricanes or tropical storms, and the ODPM is really the state agency whose job it is to prepare the state's machinery to respond. So we have, there's work to be done towards improving the rapidity with which the ODPM and similar agencies can respond when something happens. We are not entirely happy that we have this down a smooth way. Local government is those are the bodies that will first realize what has happened in the districts. There are 14 local government bodies in Trinidad and Tobago, and all of them may at the same time be making a demand, or the lines of communication may be blurred or may be ineffective, and that's an area we need to improve on. So what we need to do is, every time we go through this exercise, we ought to have lessons learned and try and improve so that the next time we are in a better position or that we respond better. I'm afraid that we're probably not seeing that just yet, and that is something that we'll have to review and strengthen our ability to respond. It is reasonable to say that seeing that we struggle with this level of inclement weather and whatever else, and one may ask if something big really happens, whether we are really positioned to. That is a question that we all have to ask ourselves, and the government needs to ask that question and go through some exercises, some tabletop exercises, to ensure that we strengthen, identify where there are weaknesses, either in organization, personnel, resources, so that in the event that something worse happens, that we don't find ourselves completely at sea.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rowley.
Good afternoon.
First question. The areas affected by this week's flooding are pretty much the same as those affected by Brett, probably a little bit more. What long-term solutions are the government considering to possibly widen the waterways, major waterways, or come to some engineering solution in the long term for probably a disaster next time?
Well, the long-term solution is to have reasonable engineering works done on the main watercourses and the tributaries. But that is not to say that even if you, as we do these engineering works, whether it is clearing, which we do, building up levees, which you may have to do some more of, once you have a situation where in a valley or in a catchment area you have a downpour that provides water that is more than the channel can carry, the water will have to go somewhere, and especially if you have tide problems at the mouths of the river, as we have fairly insignificant tides which may prevent the river from flowing out very quickly, one has to rely on the level of engineering, because drainage works with hydraulic engineering. And you always hear, whenever we have these situations, you hear kind of finger pointing as to who didn't clear what drain and who didn't clear what drain. While that may be so in some instances, by and large, it is the capacity of your water courses, large, medium, and small. Because if it was simply a matter of clearing the drain, once you clear the drain, you could have guaranteed that there'd be no flooding. But water has to go somewhere once the downpours provide that water. So what we have to do is to ensure that where we are able to impact on it through engineering solutions, like we do at the Caroni River, we've dredged the Caroni River, build up levees on the banks and so on. But then we had a softening of the banks by earlier rain, and on this occasion we had 6 breaks on the banks, and that would intercept, would cause flooding. We can strengthen the banks and so on. But these are engineering things that we keep doing all the time. And of course, in the other areas, especially areas which are occupied by communities where we have people interfering with the surroundings, like clearing hillsides, creating landslides, allowing trees to fall into the passageway, these could generate incidental drainage problems as against in initial capacity problems, as well as dumping in the river courses and also building in the water courses. These are all the things that impact upon this kind of situation. And so we have to address them as they exist or as they come, to ensure that when we do have excessive rainfall, we don't end up on every occasion having to experience these kinds of things.
Dr. Rowley, how do you respond to criticism from some members in the worst affected areas who were disappointed in not seeing you in the field alongside your ministers in the worst event?
Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that they would like to see me, but we all have different responsibilities. There's a government structure. As I said, the parliament is in session. We are doing the national budget. I spent my time there. As soon as I was finished there this afternoon, I organized this press conference so as to speak to you and to speak to them. We have 3 ministers in the field whose portfolio responsibilities are the effects I just mentioned to you. We have the Minister of Works, who is the minister responsible for drainage. We have the Minister of Local Government, who is the minister responsible for the local government bodies. And we have the Minister of National Security, all of whom are government ministers at the top of the government who are out there. So if it was feasible for me to be there, I would have been there, but today it wasn't feasible. No, yesterday. I wouldn't have, it would have been a different story had I not gone to the parliament. I distinctly recall sometime I was out in the south for some reason, and I came to parliament late, and that was the story. I wasn't in the parliament. So we have different responsibilities, but I can tell you, and I can tell all those affected, that I've been in continuous contact with the ministers, and I've been getting a running commentary as to what is happening, and what decisions have to be made were made, and we are out there. The government is present, providing relief and providing monitoring and assistance as and where those requests are made available.
In a way, you have answered my question, but it's in terms of budgetary provisions indeed to help those who would have been severely impacted to rebuild their lives. What about the provisions?
Well, again, we do have a model where if there are people who have been severely impacted and for whom assistance is required, that assistance would be made available in the way we did with Brett, where we had we assessed the nature of the damage, we assessed the extent of the assistance that's required, and we make some provisions, and there are qualifications that are required, and we, as a nation, we try to help those who are affected and can benefit from some assistance from the state.
For the damages they receive?
Well, I don't like the word compensation. It is assistance. Relief assistance, not compensation. We had made certain funds available. There were certain processes to have been followed. The local government bodies were required to put their requests in, and the public officers will assess them, and those persons who meet the criteria would have got the assistance. And I guess the same thing will happen now. We would go through the same process of determining who qualifies for the assistance once once an assessment is made. We can't make a full assessment until the water has drained off and the event has passed, and the officers from the Ministry of Social Development will go in along with other officers and determine what the state's role is from there on in.
No more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all very much. And there will be a press conference tomorrow morning at National Security, where the ministers who are in the field and the ODPM will give you a more up-to-date, see what happened tonight and into tomorrow morning. Okay? Thank you very much for coming on.